Hello, and welcome everyone to our webinar presentation today titled Simplifying Global Hiring. Today we're going to take a look at a high level of all of the component parts that that make up an international recruitment campaign or strategy, and to walk through those with a view to, as our title suggests, simplifying the global hiring process. My name is Ron Hoppe. It's my pleasure to lead our presentation this morning. I currently serve as CEO of Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions, and if I've not yet had the opportunity of meeting you, I hope I'll have that opportunity at some point in the near future. As we go through our presentation today, I would invite you to share any questions or comments that you may have using the chat section on your screen. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues who are monitoring the chat conversation. They'll be keeping track of any questions, and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions after the formal part of the presentation today, and we always look forward to that. Also, just before we jump in, we always appreciate knowing who's joining us and from where. So if you would be kind enough to let us know what country you are currently in and where you're joining us from today, that would be greatly appreciated. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. And I thought we would start with the overarching question of, is international recruitment right for us? For us, I mean your organization. So before we delve into what the component parts of international recruiting are, it's important to think about whether this strategy is appropriate for your organization or not. And a couple of thoughts come to mind as you ask yourself this question. And the first point that comes to mind based on my experience is it's important to gauge and to have a handle on what is the organization's leadership philosophy. And the reason leadership philosophy is important is because an international recruitment campaign and strategy is something that is going to be a part of a medium to longer term strategy in your overall staffing plans. It's not something, it's not a strategy that you can utilize to produce immediate results in the short term. Very, very seldom, I'm speaking in general terms, international recruitment fits as part of a medium to longer term strategy. So in terms of leadership philosophy, it's important to understand whether your leadership or you as a leader are looking at your staffing strategy from a longer term perspective, or if your organization is intently focused on producing immediate results in the short term, and that's your overarching approach, where each quarter success and failure is evaluated on your staffing strategy on a quarter by quarter basis. If that's the case, then international recruiting may not be a fit. But if in fact you understand, or hold the view that staffing is going to be a challenge for the foreseeable future, the long foreseeable future, and that to derive different outcomes than are being derived today in the future, what are we going to do today to prepare for that future? Then in fact, international recruiting can be a very, very valuable component part of your overall staffing strategy if you are approaching this with a longer term view. Also, leaders in some organizations that we regularly encounter are hung up or reluctant to pursue international recruitment because of past experience, a negative past experience. And some of those experiences from my conversations, they go back 15, 20, and even more years than that. Some are in more recent times. But I would simply say that much has changed in international recruiting. There is now an opportunity to, I think, better vet potential recruitment partners. Things like the CGFNS Alliance for Ethical International Healthcare Recruitment, the American Association of International Healthcare Recruitment, all provide valuable resources on certified firms in the case of CGFNS, and of firms that have a long, reliable track record. So understood and appreciated that some have had less than satisfactory experiences with international recruitment in the past. Simply stated, much has changed even over the last 5 years. And where international recruitment in the past historically has been an extension of domestic contract staffing strategies by just adding international contract workers, there is now a very strong acceptance and availability to add international teammates on a direct hire, permanent placement basis, which provides not only the benefits that come from having an optimum number of core staff, but it also provides a very, very compelling financial benefit. So don't let past experiences hold you back in evaluating whether international recruitment is right for you. And then ultimately, to be successful in not only implementing, but managing and continuing with an international strategy, it's always important to have somebody within your organization that is going to be a champion for the effort. It's just the reality of healthcare at all levels and in all types of organizations where talent acquisition, HR, nursing leaders are pursuing new employment opportunities from time to time. And if there's no one in the organization that really is a champion for the cause, and you have some leadership turnover, that can create a void. So when I say a champion, should probably be more accurately stated champions, that you have individuals in the organization that will be able to have background and experience with the program and carry that forward as time goes on. So those are just a couple of thoughts for you to consider as you start to evaluate whether international recruitment is right for you. We can go to the next slide, please. So if the decision is made, obviously, to consider international recruiting or to add that to your overall strategy, the program initiation phases really are made up of 3 main component parts that I think are very important to be able to stand up and implement this type of effort in a timely manner. So obviously, it all begins with the contracting process and working through that. I don't think I need to spend too much time on that. But a really important step in the process is something called the prevailing wage certification application. So if you're not currently actively recruiting international candidates, it's almost certain that you will not have a prevailing wage certification on hand. This is a certification that's issued by the Department of Labor. The application process is not difficult, but it does take some time for the Department of Labor to process such an application. So here at Worldwide HealthStaff, when we're speaking with potential clients, it's our practice to extend an offer for us to file these prevailing wage certification applications, even before the contracting process is completed. We do this not to create any obligation, and there's certainly no cost, and there is no obligation ever for us to do this work, but we do this in an effort to just advance the overall timeline and get the clock running on this process even while the contracting process is playing itself out. Prevailing wage certification applications can easily take 6 months for the Department of Labor to process. So anything that can be done to get that process running sooner rather than later is only going to contribute to the timeliness in which your international strategy can be stood up and implemented. And then the other important thing to be considered at this point in the process is for you to be able to identify your recruitment scope. And how is it that you're going to determine that? We have had experience where organizations get through the contracting process, they get through the prevailing wage certification process, only then to be in a situation where it takes an extended period of time to either survey different units, different facilities in different markets to come up with an initial recruitment scope. From our experience, what's most important is just to come up with what you think your best estimate is based on current and anticipated needs. This is a number that's going to be, a number that's going to change over time. It doesn't need to be an exact sort of detailed projection, but everybody has a good sense based on what they have found to be hard to fill positions, what their current vacancies are, what they expect retirements and other things to be in the future. So just being willing and able to contemplate what the scope of that recruitment will be and to sort of get a best estimate together so that the program can get up and running. And then we'll talk a little bit later on about a pipeline approach and how that mindset or that philosophy plays into supporting the strategy overall. So once the decision is made that international recruitment can be a valuable part of the strategy, then the next considerations are, okay, how do we initiate a program? I think well summarized by saying it's contracting, getting the prevailing wage certification application started ASAP, no need to wait, and then to also be thinking about what the recruitment scope is, even while the contracting process is underway. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we have contracting completed. We've got prevailing wage certification in hand. We have identified the types and numbers of nurses that we'd like to target in an initial effort. And then the next steps in the process really are around recruiting. So how are you going to find the candidates that you are looking for? How do you find them? How do you screen and vet them? And then how do you get them through an interview and hiring process? We've had the experience over the years where some healthcare providers have viewed international recruitment as a do-it-yourself type of effort. And that's certainly one approach. It's going to sound self-serving for me to say this, given the work that we do, but our experience has been that we've not seen those organizations generally succeed in a meaningful way. And over the years have seen scenarios where there's been some pretty significant failures because the thought that, well, we're recruiting here domestically, we'll just extend our recruitment practices abroad, really is not an accurate interpretation of what's required. In working with candidates in the international marketplace, it's really important to have context. Really important to have context, and that context is understanding the healthcare systems in the countries that you may be recruiting candidates from, understanding the context of their practice, having some insight into the education system in that country. And what I mean by that is, which are the top colleges that graduate the highest caliber candidates versus maybe less well established or less reputable educational institutions. So there's a lot that goes into understanding a candidate. What is what's the transferability of job titles from one country to another? We've presented nurses in the past where their resume indicates that they're theater nurses, only to be asked, what in the world is a theater nurse? Well, in some countries, the OR is known as the theater, the operating theater. So there's context, and there's some cultural awareness, and just some very practical things that need to be considered to ensure that you are sourcing the best possible candidates, that you are screening them accordingly and appropriately, and then trying to establish an interview process that will fit both your schedule and align with candidates who may be living in 8, 10, or 12 time zones away from where you are currently located. So we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. For candidate screening, just the one important thing that I will mention for both registered nurses and medical laboratory technologists is one of the screening criteria you want to insist on under all circumstances is that nurse candidates would have already passed the NCLEX RN US licensure exam before the time of interview. And likewise, that MLT candidates have achieved the US ASCPI certification before interview. Those certifications, those exams are required essentially to even be able to file an immigration application. And it's certainly possible to interview and extend job offers to candidates that don't have these certifications, and they may accept those offers, but in reality, those candidates aren't going anywhere until those certifications have been obtained. So in the screening process, you want to make absolutely certain that you're dealing with candidates that we would describe here as exam passers. They've passed the NCLEX exam, they've passed the ASCPI exam, so that they can move forward very quickly from job offer acceptance to immigration processing. Interview scheduling and facilitation also has several important considerations attached to it. We appreciate that on the healthcare employer side, everybody is very, very busy these days. Staff resources are stretched, and it can be difficult sometimes just to free up the required staff to even conduct these interviews. There's a variety of strategies that can be used in terms of, do you interview candidates, sort of on a one-by-one, one-off basis when it fits into the schedule? Do you set a limited number of hours every week or every 2 weeks for the purposes of conducting these interviews? Or do you contemplate a strategy whereby you sort of focus your resources over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 days and knock out all of your recruitment priorities, all of your recruitment objectives in a very short, focused period of time? Here at Worldwide HealthStaff, we work with clients that utilize all of those strategies, and different approaches work better for different organizations. But what I will say, and what we have experienced for sure over the last 12 to 18 months, is organizations that are looking to recruit larger numbers of international nurses. And by larger numbers, I would say probably 50 or more, that conducting those interviews in what we call the big bite approach. So focusing recruitment resources for 2 or 3 days, and knocking out whatever number of interviews are needed to get to the required number of offers, we have found to be very, very well received, very effective. And we've executed this strategy for employers that have, over the course of 3 or 4 days, 4.5 days, interviewed anywhere from 50 to 800 NCLEX passed registered nurses in the course of less than a week. So how it is that you're going to actually execute your interview hiring is also a very important consideration. Next slide, please. So now we've gotten through, we've found the right candidates, we've interviewed those candidates, we've extended job offers. Job offers have been extended. And while that may feel like it's the end of the recruitment process, it's really just the end of phase one of what is required in a successful international recruitment placement. Phase two starts with immigration processing. So it's important to have that capability available to you. Few organizations have this resource available internally. Some organizations may work with outside third-party external healthcare immigration attorneys. We here at Worldwide HealthStaff also have an in-house legal team that can seamlessly support this part of the process. So recruiting and hiring is completed. Now we need to contemplate getting the immigration process underway and managing that process. Also, in this part of this phase of the overall process, we need to consider U.S. licensure and getting the candidates prepared with regards to becoming licensed in the U.S. We could do several webinars just on this process, but suffice to say, it does require a certain level of expertise to complete this work, as each board of nursing has slightly different requirements. Each candidate comes with their own unique fact set. Licensure requirements are changing from time to time with boards of nursing, and timing is also very important in terms of when an application is first filed in relation to when that candidate might actually be arriving in the U.S. So there's a large number of considerations in terms of how to be successful in that regard. And then as the candidates continue to proceed through the immigration process, someone is supporting them with their U.S. licensure. Then from a clinical perspective, although these nurses and other clinicians are coming with numerous years of experience, in the case of nursing, you would expect on average, if you recruited a number of nurses, some will have 2 or 3 years of experience, some will have 10 years plus. But on average, you would be expecting that these candidates are coming to you with 6, 7, 8 years of experience, 5 to 8 years of experience. And despite having that experience in different countries, there still is a process of transition to U.S. clinical practice, and having resources available that helps bridge their experience that they have wherever they may have been working around the world to working at your facility is also an important component part of ensuring not only a successful transition of the international candidate, but also to ensuring that they integrate well into your team and are making a valuable contribution for years to come. So in planning out an international recruitment strategy, it must be contemplated. How are we going to look after the immigration processing? How are we going to manage licensure? How are we going to support our candidates as they prepare to arrive from a clinical transition point of view? Next slide, please. Right, and then sort of the last big category of the process, last big step is the overall relocation process. And relocation is much more than ensuring the applicant has a plane ticket to arrive, in your city or your location. The relocation process really starts quite some time before an applicant is actually departing for the United States. Imagine if you were to pack up and move to a country that you've never been to, halfway around the world. You can quickly understand just all of the many considerations and plans that need to be made. At Worldwide HealthStaff, we have a relocation team that is focused on working with our candidates that are planning for relocation, actually helping them through the physical relocation process, which includes not just travel, but our family members coming with them, what sort of supports are needed there. Temporary housing is a massive consideration, and very, very important to have a plan for a temporary housing strategy when candidates arrive. And the relocation process doesn't end when their plane lands on U.S. soil for the first time. There's also a need for post-arrival support, ensuring that their acculturation is going smoothly, identifying any issues that while they are small issues, and if they can be identified sooner rather than later, almost every concern or issue can be addressed. Everything from where is my social security card, to I'm homesick, to how do I get a driver's license. All of these are important things, and again, need to be considered as what goes into a successful international recruiting strategy. Next slide, please. So then, to summarize some of these points that I've been touching on, is then, so let's take this up a level and talk specifically about how do we implement a successful international recruitment strategy. And this may vary somewhat from organization to organization, but I think there's also an approach that's really appropriate to organizations of all sizes. But I think it's important to identify what the various options are for everyone to consider as we go through this process. So the first question is, okay, we think international recruitment can be a valuable part of our overall strategy. How are we going to get this work done, right? There's no HR department or no talent acquisition team that I've met that has said to me, we're really not that busy these days. We'd like to take on a big new project, learn about something we've never done before. We're really excited about doing that. That's not typically what we hear, right? Everybody is extremely busy. But in the spirit of kind of putting all the options on the table, one way of implementing a successful international recruitment strategy is an a la carte approach. And by a la carte, I mean, addressing each of these component parts that we've been speaking with sort of individually. So the first of those would be, the candidate the candidate sourcing, screening, the interview process. That's one component part. Do you hire an outside agency just to help with that? Is that agency in the US? Is that agency abroad? How are we going to get through finding the right candidates? How are we going to screen them, interview them, hire them? Many organizations, particularly larger organizations, probably receive quite a number of unsolicited applications from international candidates on a pretty regular basis. I know many organizations just kind of set those applications aside because they're outside of their normal sort of business practice. But even if you're receiving those unsolicited applications, do you have the ability to properly vet those and evaluate those yourself? So a la carte approach. Okay, and then if you're going to use that approach, you're through the interviews, you're through the hires, you're likely going to hire an outside immigration law firm to do that work. And then in addition to that, you're either going to find some internal resources or maybe look to an outside vendor that's going to help with licensure and other sort of clinical transition types of things. And then in terms of the relocation process, maybe you have a team that does some relocation work for you. Is that team then have the capacity to do that work for international candidates where the requirements are significantly different than they are for domestic relocations, et cetera? So in the a la carte approach, you're going to be working with at least 2 outside vendors. And if you're working just with an outside immigration law firm, it means you're going to dedicate meaningful internal resources to help support this effort. And do those internal resources have the experience to work with international candidate pools? So it's certainly a viable option. I know of some organizations that have taken this approach in the past, but most organizations that we work with here at Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions choose what we refer to as a turnkey solution, where you have one provider that is responsible for all of the major component parts of the process, from candidate sourcing, screening, hiring, facilitating that process, seamlessly managing the immigration process and working with candidates through that, ensuring that they are prepared to take the next step and the next step in that process at the right time, to manage that process proactively so that candidates are able to arrive in the US in the shortest possible time. At the same time, working with candidates on their licensure issues, working collaboratively with you, the employer, and the candidate to put in place a clinical transition plan and program that's relevant not only to the candidate, but that's also relevant to your organization. And then ultimately managing all of the relocation components and parts that go into planning, executing, and then supporting someone after they have after they've arrived here in the US. A la carte approach, turnkey approach. Both of those are open for consideration, with the question being asked, what resources do we have available internally? And then while we're talking about what makes a successful international strategy, I think it's also important to understand that to be most successful, international recruitment should be viewed not as an event or a project or an initiative. It should be viewed as an ongoing component part of an overall staffing strategy. And the way that sort of translates into practice is to come up with a plan to develop and maintain a pipeline of candidates over time. Right? Early on, I talked about, identifying your recruitment scope. And I think it's sometimes not as important as some organizations think it is, that initial recruitment scope. The most important thing is to get started, right? Immigration applications are essentially processed on a first in, first out basis. So an application received today, all things being equal, is going to receive a visa ahead of an application filed a week from today, etc. In getting started and having this pipeline mentality, you will always have the ability, particularly if you're working with the right partner, to be able to evaluate the progress of your candidate pool. Candidates can be added to the pipeline at any time. And over time, your plans and your needs and your strategies are also going to change and evolve as you look at perhaps service line expansion, adding a new service line, maybe deleting a service line, acquisitions, new construction. All of these things are part of everyday reality for healthcare providers. So looking at international recruiting of, yes, we have to start, we have to get some people into the pipeline to get started, but there's then nothing inhibiting you from systematically or strategically adding to that pipeline every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. And we have many clients, and in fact, the clients that generate the greatest success from this strategy are those that have established a pipeline over time, and have maintained that pipeline. And at times, they will have added just a few candidates to the pipeline in a given time period. At other times, they will have added a larger number. And again, all informed by what their recent experience is domestically, what their priorities are as an organization in the foreseeable future, and then what are some of the big things that may be on the horizon that you want to get prepared for proactively. So evolving a strategy over time simply speaks to the fact that, again, as I said, international recruitment shouldn't be seen as a singular event or a one-time project just to boost the number of candidates in process. It's really something that can provide you with a predictable pipeline and a predictable supply of candidates over time. Next slide, please. We'll just quickly go through this slide. I think I've spoken to some of these points already. In an a la carte approach, again, you're going to be working with multiple vendors, and whatever that entails, invoices from multiple vendors, etc., coordination, project management. So I think enough said on that. It's a question of which outside parties are you going to work with and what internal resources do you have. Next slide, please. Alternatively, you may also want to consider international recruitment, partnering with someone that's going to provide you with a turnkey approach that covers, all of the major component parts. That's the approach that we take here at Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions. It's one that we have found to be widely preferred by employers across the country, and would be happy to speak with anyone about that in greater detail. Next slide, please. And then again, just as I commented on a moment ago, evolving your strategy over time, developing a pipeline model for optimum results, When we're talking about international nurse recruitment, we're talking about individuals that will arrive in the United States as permanent residents, aka green card holders, aka permanent residents. The great news is nurses that arrive in this visa status have a visa that never expires and never needs to be renewed, provided they maintain a very basic residency requirement here in the US. Excuse me. But it is also possible, as part of an overall strategy, and this strategy evolving over time, to supplement that strategy with other visa programs, such as the H-1B visa or the TN visa, that is a visa specifically for Canadian and Mexican applicants. And increasingly, we're seeing there's a growing pool of international student graduates here in the US. These are international students that are graduating from a wide variety of healthcare programs here in the US. And by virtue of having graduated from a US college or university, they have certain work authorization and visa options available to them that often make them attractive candidates. All of these exist in relatively small numbers, though. So when I say supplementing an overall strategy, the core of an international recruitment strategy, particularly for nurses, is always going to be to use that permanent residency green card visa option. So in conclusion, if we can get to the next slide, like every other strategy that health systems consider, there are pros and there are cons to be contemplated. I like to say there's opportunities and limitations. But when we look at the possibilities and the limitations as it relates to international recruiting, one, in terms of a pro, is international recruitment provides an opportunity to add to the supply, new supply to the workforce overall. Healthcare shortages in the United States today really are not recruitment problems. They are really a supply and demand problem. So in many markets and in the country overall, there are simply more open positions than there are qualified applicants to fill them, period. That's a supply and demand issue. That's not a recruiting issue. And one of the few answers to the question of how do we add to the supply is international recruiting. So that's a pro. Adding urgently needed experience to the workforce. I touched on experience briefly earlier. Today, the U.S. is producing more new graduates, more new nursing graduates than ever before, which is a very positive thing. And we're seeing hospitals employ new graduates in larger numbers, in greater proportion than ever before, in part out of necessity, simply to have hands and a body to do work. But while that is helpful to a point, what most healthcare systems are desperately longing for and desperately needing is that experienced mid-career clinician that can make a meaningful contribution to their workforce in a very timely way. So international recruiting is a great way to add to the overall experience level of your workforce as the domestic workforce continues to become increasingly novice. And lastly, under the heading of pros, there is currently a very large, very qualified pool of candidates around the world. In the last several years, we've seen all-time record numbers of nurses around the world taking and passing the NCLEX RN licensure exam. The pool of candidates is deep, which means that you can hire highly qualified candidates And you can also hire in some significant volumes if that's appropriate for your organization. In terms of limitations or cons, really the main issue that always comes to the fore is how long does this take? What is the timeline? If I interview a nurse today, when are they going to be here working? And the answer, honestly, is it depends. And the best that anybody is going to do, if they're answering you honestly, is they're going to point towards what recent experience has been in terms of timeline, because timelines vary and they change, if not from month to month, but they can certainly change from quarter to quarter and certainly from year to year. The processing timeline has been the subject of various webinar presentations that we've done in the past and even recently. But I'll simply say that in recent history, we have seen processing timelines in the range of 18 to 24 months. That would be from the time that an immigration petition is filed to the time that an applicant receives their visa and is able to relocate to the US. In more recent months, we've seen that timeline extend out just slightly to about 26 months. There is, I think, reason for optimism to think that that timeline could come back under that 24-month period of time with some legislative or regulatory reforms that are, always under consideration in Washington. We've seen, as recently as 3 years ago, 3 years ago, processing times as short as 12 months. So while the processing time is somewhat uncertain, and I'll submit that 18 months and 24 months is long, it's too long, right? International recruitment is also responding to an issue and to a challenge and to a problem that is not short-term in and of itself. Employers today are faced with workforce issues that are going to be as or more challenging 2 years and 3 years and 4 years from now than they are today. The population continues to age, the workforce continues to age. We're going to soon start to see a decrease in the number of US college graduates, which will have a longer term impact. So as I started by saying, this is a medium to longer term strategy. And again, if this, if the organization is focused on just what can we do right now, this strategy won't work. But if you're looking to do things today that will put you in a position of getting a different outcome 18 and 24 months from now and beyond going forward, then international recruitment certainly can be a very, very important component part of that strategy to help you keep your overall workforce experience levels up. It can bring you a significant cost savings, particularly the direct hire permanent placement approach. And it can help you with significantly support your efforts in the area of diversity. It can significantly support your retention strategies in terms of having appropriate staffing levels, which contribute to staff morale, minimize stress and burnout, etc. So there's many qualitative as well as quantitative considerations with many positive outcomes related to a well-planned, thoughtfully executed international recruitment strategy. And the team here at Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions would welcome the opportunity of speaking with any one of you about how this might be appropriate for your organization and to help you think through what your next steps may be in this regard. I've mentioned today the fact that we've done webinar presentations on a number of related topics, and that's our practice. We try to bring webinar presentations on a very regular basis that are of direct application either to our applicants around the world or to our healthcare providers here in the United States. All of those webinar presentations are available for viewing on our YouTube channel at Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions. So I would invite you to visit there if you're interested in learning more about, for example, H-1B visas for nurses, if you're interested in learning more about timelines. And of course, you can always reach out to us directly. We do have an upcoming webinar. If we could get to that slide, please. Our next webinar that may be of interest to you is titled Navigating Workforce Challenges, a Clinical Leaders Roundtable. This webinar will be led by Laura Messino, who is our Chief Nursing Officer, and she will be joined by several Chief Nursing Officers from health systems that have successfully developed and implemented international recruitment strategies in their organizations. And you'll have an opportunity to interact with these clinical leaders, ask them about their experience, share any questions that you have. So if you are responsible for any aspect of the clinical part of service delivery, or if you're just generally interested, we invite you to join this next webinar, which will be on April 9th at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And more information on that and registration will be posted on our LinkedIn profile. So if you haven't already followed us there, the invitation always is to please do that. So with that, I don't know if we have any specific questions to speak to today, but CJ and Sydney, if we do, I'm happy to take those in the minutes that we have remaining.
Yes, thank you, Ron, for that. We have a couple questions that have been placed in the chat that are particularly candidate facing. So the first one we have is, what is the current status for nurse aides who are waiting for USCIS approval, and what's the category of visa for nurse aides?
Yeah. So nurse aides are generally processed also in the EB3 green card category, but more specifically, they are processed in a subcategory of EB3. So it's still EB3, but it's a portion of the EB3 program that is set aside for occupations that require less than 2 years of education and or experience in the role. Doesn't mean that candidates have less than 2 years experience. It just means the employer generally requires that. So that's where they're being processed. Beyond that, with regards to the timeline of any specific applicant, that question would need to be directed, if they are a health staff applicant, to their case manager, because the answer to that question is going to be highly dependent upon the details of when their case was initiated, what stage it's currently at, etc.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I think that answers our biggest questions that we've had in our chat for today. If there's any other questions or final thoughts anyone viewing may have, please feel free to drop those in the chat now. And Ron, if you have any kind of closing remarks or thoughts.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I'm seeing just one more question here from a gentleman who says, I'm a physical therapist and did the FCCPT evaluation. I'm open for a new position. So congratulations on completing the FCCPT evaluation. If you're looking for a new position here in the US, I would encourage you to forward your resume directly to our recruitment team. And Sydney, maybe you can just put that link up quickly in the chat while I'm wrapping up here for just a moment.
Yes.
So thank you to everyone for your time and interest today. It's always a pleasure for us to be able to spend this time with you. And I hope that something that was shared here today is helpful and useful to you. Again, please, if you're not already doing so, follow us on one of our social media channels, one or more. on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. That is where you can most reliably receive updates and information from us on upcoming webinar presentations. And we'd invite you to join us on those presentations whenever it's available. And if there's ever a time where there's a presentation that you're not able to make the particular day or time, register anyway, because by registering, you'll then be on a list that will automatically receive a recording of the webinar, probably sometime within the next day. And all of our webinar presentations are always available for review on our YouTube channel, Worldwide HealthStaff Solutions, and you're welcome to visit us there anytime. Again, thank you for your time and attention today. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon. In the meantime, bye for now.